Hey, folks, welcome to today's Rebel's Edge, where we've got a stock that had unusual put activity yesterday. The stock fell $60 today, and those options up 4,300%. Bang! Wow. I think Pete likes it when I go 4,300%.
Well, the fact that you bounced into the camera's lens, I'm like, what the hell?
Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us. It's January 25th. We're feeling kind of good because we got a couple decent bangs out of some of these unusual option activities. And you don't have to know anything about options, folks, in order to follow some of the smart money. We think the smartest money is money that is hedge funds in many cases. They're buying out of the money calls when they're bullish, and they're buying out of the money puts if they think it's going down. And when they do that and they score big, well, even if you just bought the stock on those call activities, you do okay. I mean, no one's going to complain about a $60 move in the stock, Pete, whether you have stock or whether you have options. But the stock guys will never know what it's like to make 4,300% in a day.
You're right. They don't understand leverage, John. They really don't. And I say that with this as the caveat, however, when you look, and we've seen more and more and more of this, John, over the last probably call it 14 to 18 months, we've seen far more deep in the money call buying as well, which is coming from those folks that rather than putting all that money into the stock, they're leveraging it. They still have the same amount, but they actually are doing it through the option. So it costs a heck of a lot less. And it's an amazing way to have the leverage and yet still be able to make the same kind of moves and the ride to the upside if that's indeed what they are expecting. And that's something that I don't think enough people understand, but they're starting to understand a little bit more because we're seeing that in so many different areas and not just technology stocks anymore. It's actually covering a lot of different sectors. And I think a lot more of these hedge funds and some of the others are going to continue on this pace.
Yeah, it would not surprise me, Pete. Yeah. And of course, folks, if you'd like to check out unusual option activity, you can go on over to Market Rebellion. All right, let's take a look at what's going on, Pete, with macro today. And I'm going to say Tesla being down 5%, then 6% and all that. That's kind of my macro because as Elon Musk goes so many times, does the market go? The market's soft when Elon's soft, and the markets aren't as soft as Elon's stock today, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, and the markets had a decent boost today, John, and I think a lot of folks were looking for certain things. One of the things that stood out for me is this GDP number up for Q4, up 3.3%. That, we're always talking about trying to gather as much data as we can, and that's exactly what the Fed is doing. And the Fed, of course, those are the men and women that are making a lot of these decisions on the rates, whether they're going to buy them or sell them and this and that and cutting and all the rest, pausing, which we've seen a lot of that as well. So this is just one more, John, one more arrow in the quiver that we're going to be able to try to break down and figure out exactly what the Fed's thinking. But that lasts all of about this long. And then we got to go back to the fundamentals of what's going on with a lot of these different stocks, because we've got stocks going up big and we've got some that are going down big. So it still comes down to how are you executing?
Yeah. Well, and by the way, that leads us into, Pete, fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures is pretty easy today, Pete, because we had crude oil moving through 76, the highest level since November. And it's not exploding higher, but it's, another 2%, Pete. So for me, that's the fantastic future that I want to keep my eye on. And you can bet anybody in government is keeping their eye on that too, because, it makes things tougher on all of us.
Yep. And they should be watching that. And that would be one of the many pieces of data that they're looking at. And they're looking at the price of crude as it's been on this rise for a while. How about the wild ride though, John? And I bring it up far too often, but it's just amazing is nat gas. So January 1st, it was 250. By the 16th, it was 330. By the 22nd, it was 230. And now it's 280. So if you want a wild ride, just take a look at what's going on nat gas right now. And it is going to be a bumpy ride for sure. But within that bumpy ride, oftentimes, if you're able to be fortunate enough to find the right ways to try to manipulate yourself into some of these things, it really can be very beneficial. And you and I talk about energy stocks a lot. Obviously, that's going to be a tie-in to both nat gas, but primarily into crude usually. But there is a lot of different ways that you can dissect all this information. You're talking about crude going all the way up to 76. That's been on a pretty nice 2 steps up, 1 step back, 2 steps up, 1 step back. But the direction has definitely been bottom left to the upper right.
Yeah, sure has. And yeah, energy is something that's so important, folks, because it gets us to and from places, gets your goods and services delivered, as well as for many of us that still actually go into work. You might have to drive, or you might have to rely on some vehicle of some sort, even if it's a bus that burns fossil fuel. All right, Pete, let's dive right into some of the biggest stuff that we've got going on today, which might be, Pete, Humana. And why is that? Well, because Humana made a huge warning about future earnings, and they reported earnings that were half of what Wall Street was looking for. And so the unusual activity that I spoke of at the top of the show, well, that happened to be put activity. They were buying the 385 puts. That's with the stock at 402, well, 406, and then down to 402. So it was down, 1.25% yesterday, as you see there. But early in the morning this morning, it was trading down to 342, which meant those puts were huge in the money. That's that 4,300% we're talking about, Pete.
That's a huge number, John, and it's exactly why you and I talk about this all the time. Sure, you can catch it, and catch yourself with great percentages on the stock side, but it pales in comparison when you look at what it does with the leverage and what you're able to do, and you actually have full control over how much you could lose. It's why you want to be on the option side of something like this, and you had an absolutely monster day had you actually been able to figure out that those puts are out there. That's what we do here at Market Rebellion. We look for that unusual option activity, and this one definitely fit the bill. Also, if you think back to this and you look at when we kicked off earnings season, what was it? Well, it was financials, but there was a couple other names within those financials, Delta, and then there was also United Health. United Health, what did they say? They said the cost of what they're doing is going up, and it's not very good. Well, what did we hear from Humana? The cost of doing the business that they do is going up. And as you said, those earnings are basically getting cut in half. This is a major problem, a lot of concerns out there, and it's dragging down a little bit on UNH. It's also grabbing on Cigna, John. So we are seeing that whole industry getting pulled for the right reasons, because they are facing a situation where those costs are going higher and they're not able to put it off anywhere. So their earnings are definitely shrinking.
Shrinking pretty darn fast, Pete. You're exactly right. These were the worst earnings for Humana in 9 years. Ouch.
Yeah.
All right. And if you'd like to get a book so you could read up on trading and so forth, folks, go to itsnotanoption.com. We'll tell you about that again later in the show. Itsnotanoption.com. All right. How about Paramount, Pete? Unusual activity here as well. And it's coming from, in this case, Mr. Ellison. This is Larry Ellison's son. He has, whenever you watch Tom Cruise movie and you see Skydance at the beginning of the movie, whether it was Maverick this year or Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning this year, or began last year, I guess, but they're still playing in theaters. Those are movies that Mr. Ellison backs. He's a 41-year-old brilliant guy that owns Skydance, and he's making a run at Paramount, Pete. So that unusual activity was they were buying upside calls, and the stock moved up today. So people had another nice score with PARA, Paramount.
They did, and the Redstone family is kind of like, whoa, hold on now. We're not really ready to get out of this whole thing. So we'll see how that all plays out over time, John. Usually enough money will make somebody maybe change their mind. So we'll see if that does change the mind. But for right now, we did get that spike like you're talking about. And the options, the unusual options that we had seen were for January 26th. Yes, that expires tomorrow. It had to happen between the time of that buy, which is just a couple of days ago, up until this Friday. Well, it happened today. Got that nice spike, got up and through that 14 level. And that's when those options went from, give or take, call it 20 cents to almost 60 cents. So a really nice move to the upside. When you look at risk reward, it made a lot of sense. That's what we were looking at. And that's a lot of part of what we are trying to teach people with It's Not an Option is the unusual option activity is just one step. It gives you at least a foot in the door to understand a direction. But then you've got to understand how the options work and the expiration cycles and the entire thing, all the Greeks that go into it. So it is important to be educated. And I would always tell anybody, you don't just jump in. You got to get that education. And if you do, it gives you a much better chance to have some of these winners like what we're seeing today. And you better be disciplined because you get that big pop. You got to be able to say, all right, I'm going to get rid of some of this. Maybe not all, but at least some, because it's already reverted all the way back, John. So those options that were 20 cents that went to almost 60 cents are back towards that 20 cent level because the stock is pulled back. So you've got to understand all of that as you're trying to dissect all the information you can. But this is another one that fit the bill in terms of the UOA was right.
Sure was. And if you'd like to learn more about all the different subscription services that Pete and I do, make sure you go to marketrebellion.com/get started. That's marketrebellion.com/get started. All right, Pete, I got one that got started in a big way today, IBM, because they came out with Q4 earnings that beat expectations, their best earnings, Pete, in 5 years. And you were on, God, was it Cheddar, Pete, that you were on talking about that and saying, hey, let's pay attention to some of these software plays, to some of these companies that are putting up some pretty darn good numbers, because the best earnings in 5 years, Pete, free cash flow, huge, bang. That's a great day for IBM.
It is. And IBM, I know we're going to take a little look at that clip, but before we do, it's a combination of a lot of things that they have done right over the last couple of years, setting up to what the company is now, John. That acquisition with Red Hat and that whole thing is certainly something I think that's been great. You talked about the free cash flow. That's phenomenal. But the lucrative deals that they're doing with Red Hat, with that open source, and and what they've been able to do with the consulting and the software and all these wonderful things. That free cash flow, $12 billion, that's a real number too, right? I mean, so we look at everything. You talk about the earnings. That's been great. Their AI book doubled quarter over quarter. Now that's pretty impressive at any level, but at IBM level, that's a monstrous move. So they are making a lot of moves in the right area. And this is why, one of the reasons I pointed out earlier in the week on Monday, I said, hey, look, a lot of people don't seem to understand it, but it's not just 6 stocks out there that are moving. IBM 2023 was an incredible run to the upside. 2024 is starting off even better. So there's a lot of reasons that people should be paying attention to Salesforce and IBM and some of those. I don't know. Do we got that clip, Jared?
Anything in the software space, in that sector, Pete, that you have your eye on?
Take a look at IBM. This is a name that's made an absolutely incredible move to the upside, and it's almost been silent. And then even Salesforce, a little bit more publicity for Salesforce, but we don't hear a lot of people really talking about some of these names. And you look at the moves that they're making to the upside, it's been absolutely incredible. And it's something that I think people should take note of, because this is not just an NVIDIA rally. It's not just a 7-stock rally. This is a much bigger rally than I think a lot of people really have been talking about. And I think that's something that it doesn't concern me, because actually it gives you a better opportunity to be places that are continuing to move to the upside, where maybe we'll start seeing a little bit slowing in some of those other names. I like that little drum thing there.
Yeah. That was Pete on Cheddar yesterday, I think. Right, Pete?
Oh, yeah. I thought it was Monday. I think it was Monday.
Oh, maybe it was Monday. Okay. Monday. So again, you miss a little, you miss a lot, folks, as our friend Mike North used to say. All right. How about Tesla, Pete? Tesla, Elon Musk's shares being hammered. And why? Well, earnings basically missed. It wasn't like a little miss. It was a pretty darn big miss, Pete. And Tesla not doing so well today. It's seeing its worst day in a long time.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, John, but it's something that we all should have known and understood because basically everybody, including Elon Musk, but everybody in the EV space, whether it's Ford or Tesla or some of the Chinese names, they've all talked about the fact that they're stacking up cars at these dealerships. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that at some point they don't want any more cars coming in. That demand starts to sell off just a little bit, and that becomes a pretty major problem. Volume is an issue, and it's an issue for Tesla. It's an issue for all of these various makers of these EVs, and that's been a real problem. They missed on the earnings, not so great. The revenue, even though it was up 3% year over year, it was still a miss compared to what they were looking for. So across the board, this was a pretty awful quarter for Tesla. And it's something I think a lot of people really need to take note of right now because the EV space across the board, I think this is going to be a real problem. So the deeper somebody's maybe moved into that area, the bigger problems they're going to be facing as well. And shoot, John, at a 152 to a 300 plus 52-week low to high, sitting at 185, it's a heck of a lot closer to the lows of 52 weeks.
Which is why I'm saying, Pete, that I'm not saying I'd load the boat on this one, in the 160s, 170s or whatever, but I would load the boat in 160 or 170 because, this had nothing for Cybertruck. This had nothing for some of the other cool stuff they've done. But instead, like you say, 3% year over year revenue growth. Yeah, that's okay. But I think they can do a lot better when they start seeing how that Cybertruck revenue comes in and so forth. And they can still deliver more EVs than anybody but the Chinese. And I don't think most Americans are buying a Chinese EV.
The only scary part for me, John, sorry to interrupt, but the only scary part for me is they've got to be able to figure out sales without killing their margins. And that's the one issue why I'd be a little bit hesitant. But I understand what you're saying. And I think that if it goes much lower from here, I would definitely start to load in a few and just start to at least nibble, if nothing else, on some of the Tesla, because obviously Elon Musk, he's the leader of this whole thing. And I think he'll also lead us back at some point. But when that happens, it might take a little while.
Yeah. And keep in mind, again, folks, we told you about this, I believe, almost 2 weeks ago, Pete, when Hertz was saying we're ditching 20,000 Teslas. Yep. So, that's a pretty big number. That's more Tesla, that's more EVs than virtually every other EV maker in the U.S. combined. Mm-hmm. Now, Tesla makes a lot more than that, but you dump a bunch of cars. I don't care if it's, obviously we're not talking about Bugatti kind of production, Pete, but if you dumped a whole bunch of, F-150s, you're going to depress prices, or you're going to have them sitting on the lot a lot longer. And that's just what you described. All right. Give us the lowdown on Jim Harbaugh, Pete. What's going on? Where is he going and why?
Well, here's the deal. I think you and I called this and we were dead balls on this one. And we've talked about it a couple of times. He had a second interview with Atlanta, a second interview with the LA Chargers, and he made the decision to go to the Chargers. Shocking. But anyway, I think what we're seeing, John, is Jim Harbaugh has had enough. He's done college, NCAA, pain in the rear end. They're going to be a pain for Michigan, by the way, even after he leaves, which he's leaving, but even after he leaves to go to LA. And that's something that they're going to have to deal with as well, because there will be some sort of action, I think, taken there just because they had the first level, and that was a 3-game suspension for him. And then the second one, which was another 3-game suspension. I think the NCAA is still going to be a little bit more harsh on Michigan over time. We'll see how that plays out. But, John, the amazing thing is this is a guy who was the NFL Coach of the Year in 2011 with the 49ers when he started out, and he almost immediately had an impact. And here he is again going with the LA Chargers. It's an amazing move on his part, I think, and it makes a lot of sense because he's got a quarterback. He's got a really good offensive line. They do a great job protecting the quarterback. They got a running game with Eckler. They've got some receivers. They've got some tight ends, but they don't have enough tight ends. And I guarantee you what's going to happen. Jim Harbaugh will do what he's always done. He's going to grab 3 or 4 tight ends, either free agency or the draft. He'll have the biggest group of tight ends of anybody in football, and he's going to outnumber people just like he's always done. He did it at San Francisco. He did it at Stanford. He did it with Michigan. and he turned that program around that couldn't beat Ohio State. And meanwhile, now he's not only done that, but he's won the Big Ten on multiple occasions as well, and now a national title. So he'll have to rebuild the defense. The defense stinks, in my opinion. But if he can get that done, and he has the offense that actually chews up he's got a great quarterback, but he needs to be able to chew up on the ground. And that's what he'll do with those tight ends. And he'll throw off it. He's going to look like Michigan. They may as well put the same helmets on and everything else, John, because it will be Michigan West. And I think he'll have his tight ends blocking people, catching the ball, and all the rest of it. And it's going to be great for Eckler. It'll be better for the defense because they won't be on the field all the time.
Yep. I think this was the move, Pete, and you called it, months ago when speculation was that, well, is he going to stick around and work his way through penalties like, Pete Carroll did that, Pete, when he left. Remember when he left USC and went up to Seattle? Yeah. There were a lot of people taking a hard look at those USC shenanigans, and they were about to get some sanctions and things. And Pete Carroll goes, adios.
Well, Pete Carroll thought NIL existed back when he was at USC. He didn't understand that they hadn't started NIL yet, but the money was flowing.
Yep. And just those two quick things. One, Pete and I have talked about this, and somebody's going to start writing about it, Pete. When LA decides that they can expand that stadium because everybody wants to be part of a winner, not expand it like, build it. I mean, they can roll in seating for the Super Bowl and things like that take it to 90,000 plus. Now, season tickets, they're not doing that right now, but I think there'll be a lot of excitement in Hollywood about people wanting to be at the Chargers games, just like they wanted to be at the Rams games when they were doing so well. So watch that, because that's certainly going to help pad the pockets of the owners of that team. And then, Pete, I'd say Ohio State is feasting right now. They're not stealing Michigan players so much, but they're stealing a lot of Alabama players and others. They've already signed up $13 million worth of NIL for next year, and that's Ohio State. So, yeah, they're tired of being beat by Michigan. They're going to go, as you said, balls to the wall here.
Yep, they are. Next up, John, you got 4 jobs have been taken out of 8 in the NFL. The Raiders got Pierce, Titans got Callahan, Chargers got Harbaugh. That just happened. The Patriots have Mayo, right? There's still 4 openings. So who's the best one? For me, it's fairly easy, but then I looked at it again and I've kind of gone back and forth. But you got Atlanta with an owner, like you said, who has deep pockets, and he wants to have a winner. He has to fill up a big Mercedes stadium. So he needs the right guy, because they haven't been able to find the right guy. And they've been going through this now, John, for a while. And it's been, a lot of misses since they did go to the Super Bowl long ago. But anyway, you've got that. You've got Seattle. Pete Carroll stepped away, but he left a team that was 9-8, or they let him go, or whatever, however that you want to frame that. But they were 9-8. They had a terrible defense. They have a decent offense. They probably need a little bit more help on the offensive side, but they've got a great tight end. They got a great wide receiver. They've got a great couple of wide receivers, actually, and they can run the ball pretty good. Somebody's going to get a good job out of one of these 4. You don't want to go to Carolina. And the only thing about Washington that's kind of interesting is they do got some spotty, a guy here, a guy there, but I don't think they have enough of a team. I'd go to Seattle. If they were recruiting me and they said, what team would you want of these 4? I think I'd have to go with Seattle. What do you think?
I would too. But depending on, Pete, the Raiders have, of course, famously just paid these coaches way, way too much money, like Chucky. And most recently, this season, I think if you sign with a team like the Raiders, you're not going to finish that contract. At least I would say that. And I'd say that also about Carolina now, Pete. Mm-hmm. So let's say that I'm 70 years old and I want to maybe be around for 3 or 4 more years and then ride off into the sunset with, 50, 70 million bucks, whatever. I'd sign a 7-year contract with David Tepper every day of the week. And I know that MF is going to fire me about 3 years into that contract. He's going to fire me, and I'll be getting 7 years worth of $7 million a year, and I'll only have to basically work with that guy for 3 years. That's what I think. But you nailed it. Seattle's the best in terms of if you want to win, if you're a guy that's 40 or 45 or even less, like the Miami coach in terms of years, and you want to have a great base, that's a great base right there. Even though, as you said, the defense is aging, but Geno Smith didn't look so bad, Geno Smith didn't look so bad this year, Pete. I think he's got some more gas in the tank.
He's a decent enough quarterback. I think they just got to figure out the defense. The defense was terrible. The defense gave up so many points you can't even, it was like just adding up and adding up. It was crazy. But which is weird because that's not Pete Carroll football, right? Pete Carroll, one of the things, when I played for the guy, he actually was a secondary coach with the Minnesota Vikings. He's a secondary guy, but he's a defensive guy. And for whatever reason, he kind of lost his path over the last couple of years up in Seattle, and their defense just sort of circled the drain to some degree. So they're going to have to make a whole bunch of changes there. But remember, they still got a lot of different picks and a lot of different things going on from the days when they traded Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. So they still got at least some opportunities out of that as well.
Yep, that's a fact. That Russell Wilson trade will go down in history, much like the David Tepper trade for Bryce Young with the Chicago Bears and all that. All right, folks, make sure you check out Pete on Odyssey, the Odyssey app, or WCCO 8:30 a.m. He's on Sundays, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern time for 2 hours. So you get a lot more sports coverage there. And I will be on with Mark Lepresti with Liz Clayman this afternoon. So we're both down here at iConnections and Battlefin, 2 big conferences going on down here in South Florida. And we will be on at 3 p.m. Eastern time with the lovely and talented and very fun Liz Clayman. So we'll see what we talk about there. Maybe squeeze in a little Pete software as well as maybe some airline chatter as well. So have a great weekend. I know we got one more day to trade, but tomorrow's a travel day for us. So we'll see you on Monday, everybody.